Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Langra. I'm an attorney for the Department of Procurement Services at the City of Chicago. And on behalf of Mayor Ron Manuel and our Chief Procurement Officer, Shannon Andrews, I'd like to welcome you to our workshop today. Today we're going to be talking about procurement fundamentals, doing business with the city. I'm going to be giving just a general overview of some of the issues you need to keep in mind when you're doing business with the city. We're going to talk about our mission statement, the laws and regulations that govern procurement for the City of Chicago, the different types of procurement we do, as well as some procurement terms that we use. We're going to talk about certification just briefly because we have a separate workshop on certification issues, some contracting and monitoring and compliance issues. We're going to briefly touch on our programs and bid incentives because, again, we have another workshop just dedicated to our programs and incentives. And then I'll go over some information you can find on our website, and I'll leave it open to questions and answers. I would like to say, because this is live streamed on YouTube, we would like you to hold your questions to the end. We'll pass the microphone around so you can ask questions, and I'll try to get to as many as you have. If you do have questions, please try to keep them general in nature. If you have specific questions about a open procurement right now, something that's out for bid, I cannot answer those questions. That violates the terms of our procurement policy, but I can answer general questions about how the procurement process works. So saying that, I will dive into the material for today. So this is our mission statement. The Department of Procurement Services is the contracting authority for the procurement of goods and services for the City of Chicago. We've pledged to work together as a team and with our customers to guarantee open, fair, and timely process by establishing, communicating, and enforcing superior business practices. Integrity, public trust, and the law are our guiding principles. So doing business with the city involves compliance with a lot of different laws and regulations. So there are state laws, the Municipal Purchasing Act, which is the state statute that governs the city's purchases. And then there is the Municipal Code of Chicago. Chapter 292 is the chapter that is devoted to all the ordinances regarding city purchasing under the Chief Procurement Officer's authority. So those are the two main areas that we operate when we have federally funded projects. There are also federal laws and regulations, but these are the main two that we operate under. So I'm going to touch on some procurement terms that we use. Some of these may seem very basic. You might have heard a lot of these terms used before, but we want to tell you what the city means when we use some of these terms. Because if you're going to do business with the city, it's helpful to kind of understand what we mean with what we mean when we're saying certain things. Like, for example, I'm talking about a bid package in here. We say DPS provides a checklist for bidders in every bid package. Bidders should review the bid package, all the bid documents, and the checklist before submitting a bid. A bidder should be sure to provide all the requested information so the bid's complete. So before I dive into what some of the terms in the statement mean, I just want to say that by law, we are required to have a competitive procurement process unless there is a certain exemption in the law that allows us to use a different method. So that means that you're going to be seeing competitive bids. You're going to be seeing things that either request you to give us a price, give us a proposal, give us your qualifications, but we want competition. That gives the best price or the best value to the city. So let's talk about what some of these terms mean. So just generally a contract, many of you are probably familiar with what a contract means, but it's a written agreement between the City of Chicago and a vendor for the provision of goods or services. There are a number of different forms of contract. We have many different templates, and you can see some of our template contracts on our website. We have templates for construction contracts, templates for work services, professional services, for commodities, for vehicles. So there's different types of contracts that are structured and geared towards different types of purchases that we make. And when you are bidding on a project, we will always have a template contract with the terms and conditions as part of the package so that you can see before submitting a bid or submitting a proposal exactly what the terms are that you are going to be bound to. So bid package, I referenced bid package earlier. I'm going to say it a lot probably throughout the course of this workshop. A bid package is a set of documents issued by the city to solicit bids for goods or services. So what I mean by that is we're going to send out a bid package, and it's going to include exactly what it is the city wants to buy. So it'll have a scope or a detailed specification that's going to list exactly what it is. If we need to buy a commodity, it's going to describe to you exactly what it is. So let's say we need a stapler. It'll say that we need to have 500 staplers. They have to be capable of stapling at least 50 pages. They have to be able to fit on this kind of desk. They have to fit this many staples in it. All the different criteria of what we want. That's going to be in the bid package. What else is going to be in the bid package? We're going to have a host of affidavits and forms that you have to sign and complete that are That includes your proposal page where you put your price, what you're actually going to agree to provide the goods and services, what the prices that you're providing them for. You're going to have affidavits saying that you're going to comply with the city's different regulations that you need to comply with. There's going to be compliance documents about MBE, WBE compliance that you have to complete. So there's a number of those pages in there. And then, as I mentioned, we're also going to have a template contract or an actual contract that you will have to comply with. That's all going to be part of the bid package. So an addendum is a change to the city's requirements that are set forth in the bid package. So if we issue an invitation for bid, you take the bid package out, you're looking through it, and then ask us some questions about the bid package, and we realize, hey, we weren't clear about this. We need to make sure that everyone knows exactly what we mean by what we're saying here. We'll issue an addendum so all bidders who are interested in it can have equal access to information, and we can provide all the different clarifications or changes, removals, whatever it may be to the bid package. So when we use the term addendum, it's changed to an invitation for bid, a request for proposals, or a request for qualification. And we issue that to everyone who has picked up a bid package. So when you are interested in bidding on a city project, you have to either go on to our e-procurement system and download the solicitation, or you have to come here to City Hall, the bid bond room, and request a bid package. And you will actually sign that you've taken it so that we know who's actually requested it, so that we know who needs to get an addendum. Now, amendment or modification, this term is used when you have already been awarded a contract and we need to make a change after the fact. So we would issue an amendment or a modification to change the actual contract once it's actually awarded. If you are working in the construction area, just wanted to note that amendments and modifications are typically referred to as change orders. So that's another term if you're in that area you might hear. So I'm going to go into these three different types of procurement in more detail soon, but just to briefly touch on, when we say bids, what we're talking about is competitive bidding. And the majority of our procurements at the city are let through competitive bidding. And competitive bidding means that we are going to award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So to break that down just slightly, what I mean by that is by lowest, I mean you have the lowest price. But that's not the only thing. You have to also be responsive and responsible. And responsive means that you're actually complying with all of city requirements. So we've asked for 500 staples. You've given us a price for 500 staples, not 450. If we've asked for black staples, you're not giving us maroon ones. You're actually going to give us what we want. If we say you have to fill out this form in order for us to accept the bid, you've filled out that form properly. So that's what we mean by responsive. And when we say responsible, we mean that you're actually capable of performing for us. So with that, we take a look at things like, what's your financial wherewithal? Have you ever been debarred by another city agent, or excuse me, by the city or another government agency? Have there ever been major problems with your past performance and other contracts with the city? Those are the kind of things we look at in determining whether you're a responsible bidder. So if you have given us the lowest price in your bid, and you're responsive, and you're responsible, that is who is awarded the contract. Next is request for proposal, or RFP. This is another type of competitive procurement that we do at the city. So this process is used to solicit proposals. So price is a factor, but is not the only factor. When we use RFPs, typically these are used in the professional services realm, but this is when price isn't the only important thing for the city. There are other criteria that we need to consider when making a decision, and I'll touch on this a little bit more in detail later. And finally, request for qualifications, or RFQs. This is another form of competitive procurement. It's used to solicit qualifications, as the name implies. By that, we mean it is pure qualifications based only. We're not going to ask for price in an RFQ. We only want to know how qualified you are. So we'll ask for things like, how long have you been in business? Who are the people who work for you? How long have they been working in the industry? That's the kind of stuff we want to know for an RFQ. And this is typically used in to issue a master consulting agreement. So by that I mean we will ask for qualifications. Interested parties will send us their qualifications, and then we will issue a master consulting agreement to all the qualified respondents after reviewing their qualifications, and then we will award task orders under the master consulting agreement to the pool of qualified vendors. Another area this is used in a lot is architectural engineering contracts, especially when the contract has federal funding involved, because federal law requires us to use a request for qualifications process when we are awarding federally funded architectural and engineering contracts. So, types of procurements. We have small orders, competitive bids, requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, and job order contracts. These are the most common methods we use. There are some instances when we are allowed to do small order contracts, but that is typically a matter of last resort unless we have no other means of procuring the good or service we need. We prefer competitive procurement processes, and by law we are required, unless there is some sort of exemption, to do competitive procurement processes. So let's talk about these. So small orders. Small orders are similar to competitive bids, but this is for the procurement of goods and services for less than $10,000. Oh, I'm sorry. Those are micro purchases. $100,000. Thank you. So this is less than $100,000. So there's no formal bid specifications or public advertisement required, but there still is a competitive aspect to it. What we'll do is we'll solicit quotes from vendors via telephone, fax, written quotation, or post it on the website, but we don't post something like we do for competitive bids. We would just reach out and say, give us a quote for this. There's always going to be a minimum number of vendors that are contacted, and we typically will reach out to MBE and WBE vendors who are certified in the areas that we're procuring first. And MBE, WBE compliance is a requirement for small orders that are valued at over $10,000. And I'll touch on MBE, WBE compliance a little bit later in the presentation, but generally we're required by city ordinance to set MBE or WBE participation goals on contracts, which mean that firms that are certified by the City of Chicago or Cook County as minority or women-owned business enterprises, you have to, as a prime contractor, subcontract out a certain percentage of the work to MBE or WBE firms. So that's what I mean when I say MBE, WBE compliance. So competitive bids. I'm going to probably spend most of my time talking about competitive bids within our little subsection of types of procurement, just because this is the most common type of procurement that we do with the city. As I mentioned before, this is a competitive procurement process where bidders submit bids and the lowest responsive and responsible bidder is awarded the contract. So this is everything that's $100,000 and more. So these are formally advertised. They're advertised in the Chicago Sun-Times newspaper in the daily classified section. They're available on our website, on our procurement link, as well as on our new procurement site. You will find bids as well. You will see them in the bid bond room. If you come here, you can pick up bid packages. And this is one thing to note is the solicitation period, the period of time that we will leave it open for people to submit bids, is usually between 10 and 30 days. By law, it has to be 10 days minimum, but it's typically 10 and 30 days we'll leave a bid open. So that is the period of time you have to submit a bid to the city. If you submit a bid late, unfortunately, we can't accept it. And one thing also to keep in mind is there may be a deposit required for some bids. The reason that we do deposits is because if we ask for bids and bidders just decide to change their mind last minute, then what is the city going to do? We're going to have to do the process all over again, which is a waste of taxpayer resources. It's a waste of time, and it means that the user department has to wait longer for what they need. So there are some instances where we will request that bidders place a deposit with their bid, so we ensure that the bidder is actually going to follow through with their commitment and provide the good or service that they're offering at the price that they're offering. Occasionally we will have pre-bid meetings. What pre-bid meetings are is a meeting where you are allowed to come in. You can ask questions about the work that's going to be involved. Sometimes it involves a visit to where the work location is. So you'll see this a lot in construction especially, where if we're asking you to build something, part of the site visit might be, hey, let's go out and actually see where it is you're going to be building or what it is you're going to be modifying. It's helpful to understand that before you actually provide a bid. But it's a great opportunity to, if you have questions, to go in and actually ask the city and have an answer provided. So we'll do a review of the specifications. We will address any concerns you have and allow for questions and answers. And we strongly encourage that you attend a pre-bid meeting if we have one. Typically, they result, talking too fast. Typically, we will end up having to issue an addendum or clarification after a pre-bid meeting if people have questions, because if bidders or interested bidders come in and ask questions, we don't want only those people who are at the meeting to have access to that information. Everyone bidding needs to know the answers to those questions. So we'll write all the questions down, we'll write all the answers down, and then we'll send out an addendum or clarification so everyone has equal access. A little bit more about the pre-bid meeting. If there's not a pre-bid meeting, we really encourage you to very carefully review the specification and the contract documents during the bid solicitation period, which is that 10 to 30-day period. And contact the Department of Procurement Services during that period if you have questions. And it's important to note that you contact the Department of Procurement Services and not anybody else, because one of our rules for our procurement procedures is that if bidders contact the user department or they contact someone that has an in the know about the project, other than who is the person identified as the contact person, jeopardizes your bid. That means we could end up having to throw out your bid because you potentially could now have access to information that all bidders don't have access to, which makes it unfair. So ask questions that you have during the window of time you're provided and make sure you're asking the right person. So the bid package will tell you who to contact and they're your go-to. I've had times where people have tried to call me and I have to say, I would love to help you and I'd love to answer your question, but I know you don't want to have your bid thrown out, so call the person you're supposed to call. So just touching on what the bid documents, some important things to keep in mind. So I mentioned responsiveness is one of the things that we take a look at, and we really want to make sure that you're submitting responsive bids and don't make mistakes. So fill in all the required information. If there are blank lines in there, put information in there. Even if it's an NA, put it in there so you don't have something blank. If you have questions about whether you have to fill something out, ask us and we'll try to help you out and tell us if you need to fill out certain things. For certain bid documents, if you don't submit it and it's not executed and notarized the way we've asked, we might end up having to reject your bid. So just be careful, read through everything, ask questions if you have questions, sign and execute the document. That is a very important thing. If you submit a bid to us and it's not signed and executed, and if that proposal page doesn't tell us, oh, I am signing and executing this, I am notarizing it, I saw all the addendum, I signed all the clarifications, unfortunately, we have to throw your bid out because without that signed and executed proposal page acknowledging our addendum and clarification, we have no way to hold you to your bid. So it's very important to do that. And again, I have on here notarize a document because there are certain forms that have to be notarized. So a little bit more about the bid submittal process. I mentioned before that sometimes there are bid deposits that are required. If we do ask for one, make sure you're submitting it in the proper form. So we can't accept cash as bid deposits, so just keep that in mind. The bid deposit, if we have one, will be about 5% of the bid. It's normally refundable, but in some instances it may not be. So make sure you read the bid solicitation documents in order to see whether or not there is a deposit, how much it is, and whether or not it's refundable. And just most important, I have here bold and some red in there, so you remember this. Your bid has to be timely. So if the bid opening date is on a Wednesday, get it into us on the Wednesday or 10 a.m. on the bid opening date, because we will be in here opening them after that time, and if you come in late, we can't accept your bid. So when we get your bids in, we are going to go through, read all of them. They're all going to be open, they're all going to be read out loud. We're going to tabulate the bids, meaning we will write all of the bidders, all of their bids into a chart, and we'll post that on the website. Bid tabs and bid documents are reviewed by us for completeness and accuracy, and we try to get the bid tabs up within 24 hours. Depends on how many bids we get, the complexity of them, but that's always our goal, because we want to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible with our procurement process. One thing to keep in mind with the bid tabs is, and especially when we're reading bids out loud, is the base bid that is actually on the proposal page might not end up being the actual person awarded the contract. Because once we open the bids and we look at the bid prices, we could find out that someone is not responsive, or we could find out someone's not responsible. Or, and I'll touch on incentives later, someone could be eligible for multiple incentives, and incentives will reduce their bid price artificially, and then someone else could end up being the awarded vendor, even if their announced bid price isn't the lowest. So, just something to keep in mind. So I'm going to go on the touch on the award process. One thing to keep in mind when doing business with the city is it is a timely process, or time-consuming process. The reason it's a time-consuming process is because we have a lot of laws and regulations and policies and procedures that we have to comply with to make sure that we're doing this right. There's a lot of different levels of approvals that are required, and a lot of people need to sign off on documents. This is important because we're spending taxpayer money. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing with taxpayer money. So, just to briefly go over how the award process works, we're going to make a determination regarding whether the bidder is responsive and responsible. Then the user department will make a recommendation of award. Usually they'll say this person has the lowest bid and they are responsible. We want to award to this person. The acceptable bid is going to be packaged. So we'll put it all together in proper contract form. And then the bid and contract documents are routed through a signature approval process. So that means that the chief procurement officer is going to sign off on it, the comptroller is going to sign off on it, and the mayor is going to sign off on it. So a lot of different people that need to see it and sign it and approve it. We're also, at this point during the award process, we're going to reach out to you and we're going to ask for your insurance if it's not already provided, because typically there are insurance requirements for our contracts. And then if there are performance and payment bonds, we're going to ask you to provide proof of those as well if you have not previously provided it. So ultimately, after all these steps, the contract is awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder meeting the city's specifications. So that's the competitive bid process. Like I said, that's the type we use the most at the city, but it's not the only competitive process we use. There are some exceptions under the Municipal Purchasing Act and within Chapter 292 of the Municipal Code of Chicago that allow us to use other methods in certain situations. So one of those methods is request for proposals. So this is used to solicit proposals to implement a new project requiring some kind of professional service. It's typically used when the city doesn't have in-house experts or resources to implement a new project or services. So just to give an example of that, so let's say that we need a professional services firm to develop a safety management system. So we need a consultant to develop the system, but we also need someone to not only develop and design it, but they need to integrate it with our own systems. They need to do training, they need to do support, a whole host of other things that we need to incorporate the system into the city's operations and make sure it keeps working. Well, if we don't have subject matter experts on how to develop this kind of software or system, and it ends up being more efficient for the city to hire a consultant to develop that rather than hiring new staff to do that, we're going to issue an RFP, and we're going to solicit a consultant to manage that for the city. In the RFP, just like we'll do in a competitive bid process, we're going to include a specification that describes in as much detail as possible what the scope of services is, what we need the consultant to do. The only thing with the RFP, however, is it's not going to say every single aspect of implementing the project, because we want interested parties to submit a proposal to us and tell us what is the best way to accomplish what you're trying to do. And we're going to have an evaluation committee for RFPs. It's typically subject matter experts, whether it's in the department itself. We try to have a diverse committee in terms of diverse knowledge, diverse skills, and just diverse in the sense that we want it to mirror the city's makeup. So we'll have an evaluation committee review all of the proposals based on the criteria that are in the RFP. So for example, with this safety management system that I was talking about, we might say, we want to have a firm that has developed this kind of system for other government entities within the last 5 years. We want to have someone that's done this on at least 3 other projects. We want to have someone that, trying to think of other criteria. We want to have someone that has a support system that's available, or support staff that's available 24/7 for the city in case we have any questions we need. These are kind of things that are important to the city, and then when we look at a proposal, we'll evaluate based on those things. And price is going to be one of those factors, but it's not the only thing that matters to us. So we will rate each of those different factors in the proposal, and then the highest rated and ranked respondent is going to be awarded the contract rather than just the low bidder. So that's RFPs. So RFQs are kind of similar, but for RFQs, price isn't a factor. We only want to know the qualifications of the company. We want to know the qualifications of key personnel, so who is going to be working on the project, and we want to know the qualifications of the company itself. So as the name kind of implies, it's used to solicit qualifications from companies who possess a high degree of technical expertise and knowledge in specific disciplines. So there's 2 main realms where we kind of do this. They're in the federal world. If it is a federally funded A&E contract, we are required to do this, and the contract's awarded to the most qualified vendor. Another method, or another way we do this, is when we pre-qualify a pool of vendors, and then we would, after issuing a master consulting agreement to that pre-qualified pool, we would then award task orders to those pre-qualified vendors. I've mentioned already, but just doesn't hurt to say it again, evaluation selection is based on qualifications and technical competence. Those are what we are looking for in the RFQ realm. There's no cost proposal. The fee schedule is negotiated after we've determined who is the most qualified vendor. Again, most commonly used in architectural engineering design kind of contracts and certain categories of consultants. Okay, so job order contracting. I don't want to spend too much time on job contracts because this can get a little technical, but generally it's a firm fixed price, competitively bid, indefinite quantity contract. It's specifically designed for each department's construction programs. This is typically used for small to mid-sized, multi-traded, either construction, reconstruction, or rehab projects. By multi-traded, I mean there's a lot of different disciplines of subcontracting opportunities, like plumbers, electricians. I'm trying to think of other trades, and I'm blanking completely on them, but other trades like that. There's other opportunities. Because the way JOC works is bidders don't just give us a price. Bidders have a price catalog that they look at, which is a proprietary book, and they are going to price things based on that book. So they're not just making up a price. It's a set price in there, and then you give us your markup off of that book. So, and what I mean by this is, so there's going to be prices for various tasks. So let's say in the book there is a task for drywalling of, 8x10 room, that I'm just making stuff up. There's a price for that in the book. What you're going to do is you're going to give us what your markup on that price is. And in the markup, you're going to think of, what are all of the expenses that are involved in doing this that aren't incorporated into that price that I need to make sure that I'm reimbursed, I'm covered so I can efficiently run my business and make money. You'll work that in to your price. And that's what we look at for determining who's going to be awarded. It's not just give us a price, it's what's your markup on your price. And the value of job contracts is going to depend on the departmental needs. There's never any sort of minimum that you're going to be awarded because you're going to be bidding your markup on a price, and it's just depending on what the department needs to have built. I feel like we could have a whole separate training on job contracts. I just want to briefly touch on economic disclosure statements before I jump into some certification and compliance issues. So one city requirement we have to do business with us is that we need to know who your owners are and who, if you have corporations or LLCs or partnerships that own you, any other legal entity that own you, we want to know who the owners of those companies are too. So what we do is we have an economic disclosure statement that's online that everyone has to fill out. So this needs to be completed not only by the bidder, but also by any legal entity that has ownership interests of at least 7.5%. So if someone owns 2% of your company, they don't need to fill one out. Someone owns even 7.6%, they do need to fill one out. So it's anyone that is either directly or indirectly owning the applicant firm. It's mandatory also for most of our solicitations, so that's not, oh, I don't want to fill it out, I don't have to. We need to have it filled out in order to award you a contract. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit from the types of procurement. I'm going to touch on some certification and compliance issues. So, certification. We have 6 main types of certification at the City of Chicago. There are both federal and non-federal programs on here. So we have our minority-owned business enterprise program, our women-owned business enterprise program, the business enterprise owned and operated by people with disabilities. It's a relatively new program. And we have the veteran-owned business enterprise program, which is for small local veteran-owned businesses. So those 4 programs are city-funded programs. So you will see those typically will have MBE or WBE goals on any city-funded contract unless there is not availability of certified firms to perform on those contracts. The BEPD and VBE certification comes into play with some of our incentives and programs. So if a bidder is a VBE or BEPD or commits to utilizing VBEs or BEPDs, they may be entitled to a artificial bid reduction through one of our incentive programs, which helps them be more competitive on bids. About how the bid incentives work, it's an artificial bid reduction. So you have your bid price, and the way the incentives works is if you are eligible for the incentive, your bid price, purely for the purposes of evaluating bids, will be reduced by that percentage. So if if you get like a 2% incentive, we'll reduce your bid by 2%, and if that means that might push you lower than whoever the lowest bidder is. The contract that you're awarded, though, will be in the amount of the actual bid you submitted. I'll touch briefly on those in a minute. The DBE and ACDBE are two federal programs. This is 49 CFR Part 26 and 23, I believe. So the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and the Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. So we certify our local programs as well as these federal programs. If you are certified by the city in the federal programs, it's for Illinois UCP, which means it is a statewide certification. So that means you're certified for CTA, for METRA, and for the state, or for IDOT. So basic eligibility requirements for every program, it's pretty similar, but if you're interested in certification, I highly recommend that you check out our rules and regulations on our website, and you come to the certification workshops, because they go into much more depth about what the requirements are. But generally, businesses have to be at least 51% owned and controlled by a minority, a woman, veteran, or disadvantaged individual. The individual typically has to be socially and economically disadvantaged, meaning that they are, there are either caps on the personal net worth of the owners, or there are caps on the gross receipts size standard for the firms. Again, I don't want to get too detailed because we have a separate workshop on this, but there are certain size standards in order to be certified. And then for the BEPD program, the business must be 51% owned and controlled by an individual with disabilities. That and the DBE program are relatively new. If you're eligible for them, get certified, because we would love to certify you. WBE Participation. So once you're certified, now what? We have these, well, first off, these are the three main sources of our rules for the program. We have rules and regulations based off of 292, 650, and 420, which are non-construction and construction programs. And there's also the 49 CFR Part 26 I mentioned for DBE. So now, this is what I was trying to jump into. What happens once you're certified? So most of our contracts will have an MBE and WBE goal. Those goals are determined after we take a look at what subcontracting opportunities are and how many firms are actually certified in those specialty areas that you would need to perform those subcontracting opportunities. As long as there are enough firms to actually have a competitive process for those types of subcontracting opportunities, we'll have goals on the contract. And then the prime contractor, when they submit a bid to us, they have to submit a commitment to subcontract out at least that percentage to MBEs and WBE firms, or they have to show good faith efforts to us as to why they can't meet those goals. And by good faith efforts, and hopefully I'm not talking about this later in the slide, but by good faith efforts we mean that they have to show us that, not just that, oh, I tried, couldn't find anybody. They have to show us that they reached out to our state agencies, that they solicited MBE and WBE firms and nobody gave a bid, that they actually made real substantial efforts to try to find companies that are capable of performing in order to meet the goals. So we have goals in the contracts, can do good faith efforts, but we always want to see firms at least trying to meet those goals. So in order to receive credit for participation, this is something to keep in mind, the minority or woman-owned firm has to be performing a commercially useful function. So commercially useful function is a concept that is important and you need to keep in mind. So that means that you're actually performing and responsible for performing an actual element of the work. So you're actually carrying it out. You're actually responsible for supervising the work. It's your employees doing it. It's your equipment doing it. So the MBE WBE firm is actually performing. What we want to avoid is we don't want to have a prime contractor just have a minority or women-owned firm on the company who's performing, and then they're doing all the work. Or they're performing, but it's really the prime contractor's employees doing it, or it's really the prime contractor's equipment. Because in that case, the MBE WBE firm has no real value to the contract. We want to make sure that they're actually performing and learning and growing and developing and getting paid by the prime contractor for doing work that they're certified in. So that's a very important concept to keep in mind, is commercially useful function. One thing I think I skipped that I do want to just touch on is the MBE WBE goals. They don't have to just be met by subcontracting opportunities. The prime contractor can be an MBE WBE. That's great. They can self-perform and they can earn their credit just through their own performance. You can joint venture. You can form a joint venture with an MBE WBE firm and then you can earn credit that way. Or you can subcontract out a portion of the work. So there's multiple different ways to meet the goals. So moving back along, I'm going to touch on what happens if you can't meet the goal. So how do you ask for a reduction or waiver, and how do you show good faith efforts? So once a contractor submits their bid and they make a commitment to hit a certain percentage MBE, WBE goal, they have to meet that goal. If they don't meet the goal, they are subject to penalties by the city. So we will charge the prime contractor the difference between what they committed and what they actually met and what they committed. So these are very substantial penalties that we will impose on our prime contractors. So this is a very important program for the city, and we want to make sure that our minority and women-owned business community are actually getting city opportunities. But there are some instances where we will allow a reduction or waiver. The contractor has to request it from the CPO. So they have to write the letter to the CPO formally requesting a reduction and waiver in the goal. They have to explain why. What are the circumstances that led to that? It's not just, oh, too bad. There has to be real substantial reasons why they were unable to meet that goal. Did they have a subcontractor who all of a sudden went out of business and they can't find anybody else to perform the work? Was there some reason that portion of the work that you were planning on having MBWB firms perform, was that removed from the contract? Did the city do a huge change order and take out a portion of the work? Now you have no subcontract opportunities. There have to be real substantial reasons for why you need a reduction or waiver. In that instance, the CPO has the discretion to reduce or waive certain goals. And just like with good faith efforts, when you're bidding on a project to demonstrate that you've actually made efforts, then you can't meet the goal on the contract what you're bidding on, you have to show good faith efforts when you're asking for a reduction or waiver. Again, these are programs that the city finds very important, CPO is very passionate about, we're very passionate about at DPS, so we want to make sure that everyone is following them appropriately. So DPS is also responsible, in addition to the contract administration and certification, we monitor contracts and compliance, specifically with respect to MBWB, DBE Participation, and also with Chicago residency ordinance requirements and equal opportunity requirements. So this typically comes into play with the construction contract, but there are Chicago residency requirements for certain construction contracts. So if it is $100,000 or more and funded by the city, at least 50% of the total labor hours have to be performed by city residents, and at least 7.5% of the total hours have to be performed by project area residents. It's very important to the city that if we're using taxpayer funds to build something in the city, we want to make sure that the city residents, the city community, is actually benefiting from that work. When we bid out a project and there are these requirements, we will include a map that shows what the project area is, so that when you are trying to find residents who are in the project area to meet these goals, you know exactly what the borders are. No, sorry, go ahead.
The 7.5% of the work for the project area, how is the project area geographically identified?
It varies project by project. I don't know all, I honestly am not involved in that process myself, so I don't know what all goes behind the scenes to make up that area, but I'm pretty sure they keep in mind, like, if it's a project near a park, they're going to try to want to let go of areas around the park, so they have like a substantially large enough area to be able to recruit and get enough.
So then can the 7.5% be the same as that 50%? In other words, those same people are living within X number of miles of the park.
Yes.
And that park is in the city of Chicago, and that person is actually meeting, that employee is meeting two parameters, the project parameter as well as the city.
I believe so. The section of the municipal code that covers this, 292.330, it's my understanding that a worker can count towards both the 50% and 7.5%. Check the code again just to make sure, but I'm fairly certain that is how it works. So you could hit both. But the contract documents and the bid solicitation documents will clearly lay out who makes the. If you have questions about this during the contract term, either compliance or the user department, if it's before when you're bidding on the project, go to the person that's in the procurement department listed on the package as the go-to, and they'll find the answer and get that information to you. So the question question was whether the 50% and 7.5% could be met by MBWEs. That's correct. So those are kind of two different concepts. So this refers to actual individuals. So we want to see actual laborers out there working and labor hours being performed to meet these 7.5 and 50%. The MBWE goal refers to companies. So we want to see using businesses that are owned by minority and women-owned firms. So if the minority and women-owned firm happens to be staffed by a ton of city residents who are all actually performing on the contract, then yes, but it's kind of two separate, slightly intertwined concepts. Right. So yeah, I mean, but if we hire someone and they're all city residents and they're all actually performing, then yes. But if we hire a firm and they're a Chicago local firm owned by Chicago residents, but then let's say half of their employees are from another county because it is the 6-county region that we certify in, then they're not Chicago residents, so that wouldn't count.
You're a woman-owned business, but over 50% of the people that are working in this contract live in the same county. You got a problem. You still got to get these.
You still would have to meet the 50% residency.
Geographical.
Yeah, I mean,
that's irrespective of person and what's the gender or
yeah, and these are race gender neutral goals. That we are not saying you have to hire a 50% African American, Hispanic individuals. We're saying 50% have to be City of Chicago residents.
7.5
have to be project area. Yeah, because it's because as I mentioned, it's important for the city. If we're using taxpayer funds to build something, modify something, we want to have as many opportunities for city residents to find job opportunities through that, and not just city residents. We want to make sure that the community where that project is are also benefiting from it. So this is a very important project, city and Mayor Emanuel's direction. So. Sure. So the question was if something was built downtown, what communities would you have to hire from? It really depends on every project. They're going to have a map, and the map will tell you exactly where you can hire from. As I mentioned, I don't have direct involvement with how that map is developed, so I don't know all the behind-the-scenes things that go into it. But I do know that they will look at where is this being built, where are the communities that we can draw from that are in the surrounding area. So if an area doesn't have residents, we'll then look to the areas around that area. Yeah, so we'll actually include a physical map, and there will be like highlighted areas that are like dark, and we'll say like these are the areas you can hire from, so it'll show you exactly what we mean when we say project area. And like I mentioned, it's going to vary project by project depending on where it is we're building. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of these requirements, especially for your bidding on construction contracts, because we do take these very seriously. Sure. Sure. I believe by ordinance there are no waivers allowed for this. This is just a requirement, and there are penalties associated with failing to meet them, so we will assess penalties. I'm sorry, where does what come from? Well, the Department of Procurement Services monitors. So contractors have to give us certified payrolls. So, and we ask for what the addresses are of the employees. So we actually can see where the people live, where they come from, and if they're not meeting the requirements, then we would issue a shortfall letter, and then they would have to. And they would be required to hire people within the right. Yeah, or they would be assessed penalties. And the user departments in the city play a big role in trying to monitor this for us as well. And then one other thing I want to touch on the slide before I move on is the equal employment opportunity requirements. So on construction contracts with an estimated value of $100,000 or more, we have, it's called an incentive, but it's a voluntary choice bidders have to commit to utilizing women and minority personnel in certain roles on construction contracts. So either as journey workers, apprentices, and I can't remember the other category. I'm sorry, I'm totally having a blanking moment. But what you'll do is you will make commitments to say, like, I am going to commit to having 20% of the work performed by female journey workers. And then you put that on there, and then you can calculate what we call a award criteria figure, which is a bid incentive to reduce your bid price for evaluation. But the thing is, you have to meet the commitment. If you are making a commitment to utilize certain individual or certain groups of people in certain classifications of work, at the end of the contract, you have to show us that, yes, I committed to doing this, and I actually hired this many people, and they performed this percentage of the work. I met my commitment. So these are programs that the city finds very important. The Department of Procurement Services monitors these, and we do follow up with our contractors, and there are consequences for not complying with them. So I mentioned this previously, but doesn't hurt to touch on it again. How do you achieve compliance with MBE, WBE goals? The prime can be an MBE or WBE, or if it's federally funded, you can be a DBE. You can joint venture with an MBE or WBE, or again, DBE federal. You can subcontract a portion of the work, or you can purchase materials from an MBE, WBE. Excuse me. If you're purchasing materials, they have to be used on the project. You can't just buy stuff to stock up. You have to actually use them on the project. That's just something to keep in mind as well. So, reporting requirements. I mentioned before with the question about how do we monitor this. There are a lot of different things the contractors have to give us to show that they're actually complying. So we ask for subcontractor payment certification forms because there are requirements that our prime contractors pay subcontractors with a certain period of time of receiving money from the city. And we want to make sure that they're actually meeting those commitments. We also ask for weekly certified payrolls. Show us, who did you actually pay on the project week-to-week basis. And waivers of lien. So what a waiver of lien is basically a subcontractor saying, yes, you have paid me. I agree that you've paid me. I'm not going to come after you for this money. So we know that the contractor has actually complied with their requirements and they have paid their subcontractors appropriately.
So then what is the payroll, what is the process for paying the contract? Does the city pay it incrementally? Do they make the award in advance? Do they make the award, phased out over the project? How does that work?
Sure. So it depends on the contract. The question was, how do we pay our contractors? It depends on the contract. So the contract will actually spell out the terms for how we're going to pay you, whether it is you submit invoices on a monthly basis, or if you submit invoices based on milestones, meaning you completed certain portions of the work and then we pay. So it just depends on how the contract is structured, but the bid package will say in there.
Is there proprietary software that you have to use for city contracts? In other words,
sure. I mean, the question was whether there is any proprietary software that the contractors have to use. So the city has software that we use that you will have to register for to use. So our C2 system, or certification and compliance system, that is where you actually will go in and say, submit records like I paid my subcontractor, here are my certified payrolls. So those are things that you need to use that the city owns, but we do not require our contractors to go out and buy software or use any sort of, there's no requirements that you have certain tools unless you are working in an industry such as like an A&E industry where you have to have a certain type of drawing software in order to be able to produce drawings. I'm kind of a rough example there, but we'll spell it out if there's an absolute requirement you have to have something, but generally no. So I think I mentioned in the beginning that I was going to be real brief on this section, and I am going to be real brief on this because I do a whole other hour-and-a-half presentation, or about an hour presentation on bid incentives and programs. The city is really happy and proud to say that we have a number of great incentives and programs to benefit the vendor community. We have programs for small businesses in the construction industry, mid-sized businesses in construction, and a new program for mid-sized businesses in the non-construction area. So just to kind of briefly touch on those top three. So the SBI construction program, how that works is that in order to bid on certain size construction contracts, you have to be a small business enterprise. You have to be small, you have to be local. The size standards are based on the size standards in the construction certification regulations. So there are two size groups. There's MBI 1 and MBI 2. It's typically no more than $3 million for SBI projects. So one is up to 2 million, and then it's 2 million to 3 million. For the 2 million to 3 million size contracts, you can be no more than the size standards and the certification regulations, meaning you can be no more than the largest you can be to be certified as an MBE or WBE. For the other SBI program, the up to 2 million, you can only be half of those size standards, meaning if you go over half what the size limit is, you cannot bid on that project. These are race and gender neutral programs, meaning that anyone that meets those size standards and are otherwise eligible, being small and local, are allowed to bid on these projects. MBI is similar. There are two groups for MBI as well for construction. There is a tier of 3 to 10 million, and then there is a tier of 10 to 20 million. And this is for mid-sized firms. So this is also a race gender neutral program. If a firm is a mid-sized business, meaning that for the 3 to 10 million size, you're no more than 1.5 times the size standards for certification, you can bid on that project. For the 10 to 20 million size, you can be no more than 2 times the certification size standard. So this is a great program for those firms that are just a little bit too big to be certified anymore, or are not eligible for certification, but they're in that realm and they can't quite compete with the huge established firms out there in the construction industry. These are the projects for you, these mid-sized programs. So we will identify contracts as mid-sized business mid-sized business initiative programs contracts, and then we will bid it out. And you have to be a mid-sized business meeting those eligibility requirements in order to bid on the project. If you're bigger, we're going to throw your bid out. You're not eligible. So there isn't a non-construction SBI program because we have a target market program. So the way the target market program works is only minority or women-owned business enterprises that are certified by the City of Chicago or Cook County are allowed to bid on target market projects. So that essentially is like a similar program, but it is a program only for MBE, WBE firms. Sure.
They be able to compete with, I'm sorry, so I'm just wondering, will my firm be able to compete with those small to mid-sized non-construction contracts as janitorial? You know, like we want to bid on O'Hara, bid on something.
So,
What do those companies fall in?
So the small business and the mid-sized business initiative for construction are only construction projects. So if you are doing like a construction cleanup type service as a subcontractor, that wouldn't necessarily apply unless you're subcontracting on another firm who's a smaller mid-sized business and you're subcontracting to them. So other than construction cleanup type services in the non-construction janitorial services realm, that would fall under our target market program.
Okay.
So if you're certified as an MBE or WBE,
right,
and we have identified a janitorial services opportunity as a target market opportunity, you'd be eligible to bid on that.
So you guys reach out to us because I never heard of a target market. How do you get involved in that?
So we do a lot of outreach. So if you sign up for our DPS alerts, that's a great way to always know about our opportunities. We typically put it on our website. I think we put it on our social media presence as well. So we do try to make sure that if we have the opportunities, they're advertising out there so people are aware of that. We also try, if we know in advance, if there's going to be opportunities, to identify it in our buying guide. So sometimes you'll see things that are identified as MBI, SBI, or target market projects. Because if we know in advance that, hey, this is a perfect size for this program, we'll give everyone a heads up in the buying plan that this is probably going to be an opportunity that falls into these programs.
And then in June, we have our vendor fair.
Yes, also we have a vendor fair in June, and I believe we have a construction summit in the fall, or in February. So those are great opportunities to network and kind of get to know who the city's vendors are, the prime contractors and subcontractors, all the different city agencies. You can kind of talk about what their opportunities they have coming along. Other agencies in the city outside of the CPO's purchasing authority, they'll also be there, state agencies. So it's a great opportunity to go and meet other firms. It's a great opportunity to market your business as well. I know we're running a little on time, but I just want to briefly touch on the rest of these up here. So the Diversity Credit Program is a great program that allows a prime contractor to earn participation credit on a future city contract by using MBE and WBEs on a private sector contract. Because what we want to do is encourage prime contractors to not just view MBEs and WBEs as firms that they go to only for city work. We want our prime contractors to think of our MBWE firms as, this is a firm I like and work with a good firm. I want to work with them all the time. So that's why we have created this program where you can earn $1 credit for every $3 spent on a private sector contract. So it's a great way to encourage our primes to look to MBEs and WBEs for opportunities outside of city work. Another program is our Mentor Protege program. This is a great program. It is for non-construction and construction, although for some reason people keep thinking it's construction. It's not. You can have a mentor in non-construction areas as well. What this is a prime contractor can earn a bid incentive as well as participation credit for agreeing to mentor a minority or women-owned business enterprise. So we really want our firms to be able to learn and grow and become competitive, self-sufficient businesses. And a great way to do that is to have them team up with a prime contractor and learn from them on the job. So this requires you to enter into a mentor protege agreement, the prime contractor entering into a mentor protege agreement with an MBE or WBE firm that will be used as a subcontractor on the contract. They have to spell out to us exactly what mentoring will be provided. And they actually have to submit affidavits and reporting to us throughout the course of the contract, so we see that it's actually, the mentoring is actually being provided and the protege is actually benefiting from it. If they make those commitments, then they can earn additional participation credit. So if the goals are 25 to 5, and they decided that they're going to have a WBE as a protege, they can end up potentially getting an additional 5% towards their WBE goal they've committed to. So they've committed to 5. Now they've got 10% participation. It looks great for them. It looks great for the city. So it's a great program. It's a great selling point for MBEs and WBEs that are looking for mentors and want to learn and grow. Go to a big firm and say, I want to work on your project. I'm certified. I can do it. I can help you. If you mentor me, you can get a bid incentive, which helps make your bid more competitive, and you can get participation credit. It's a win-win for both parties.
How often do you see you?
Or
Have you been seeing any of that?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of outreach on the Mentor Protege program, and people are learning more and more about it. So we've been seeing a lot more bids coming through where people are proposing to enter into Mentor Protege agreements and actually using it throughout the course of the agreement. And from the proteges who have completed it, we've heard a lot of good things where they develop good relationships, that they're being used on other contracts, and they actually had benefits. So it's a great program.
So if you're interested in being a protege, how do you register?
There's no real way to register for it. You would have to find someone who would work as a mentor for you. So if you find someone to team up with. So if you see any bid opportunities coming out that you think you could subcontract on, and one thing you can do is take a look at what the last time we bid a similar project was, look at the bidders, and then reach out to the bidders and say, hey, I'm a subcontractor in this industry. I would like to team with you. I want to be your protege. You can participate in this program. And then if they agree to, what the bidder would do is they would submit in their compliance plan the mentor protege agreement you've agreed to, and they would mark on there that I am participating in this. So they would tell us in their bid package, like, I'm participating in the mentor protege agreement.
They're having this as a program, maybe a real good idea for them to have a way of interfacing with different vendors, in other
Sure,
words,
and that's why we have
connecting
sure,
the proteges to the mentors.
and that's exactly one of the benefits of our vendor fair coming up, because that's an opportunity for our prime contractors to meet our subcontractors. I believe we have an aspect of it where there is a kind of like
Yeah, there is a mentor, well, it's not a mentoring, it's a matching of the primes with subprime contractors.
When is it?
The next vendor fair is in February for the construction summit, and then the vendor fair that we have, that's everything, that's in June.
So again, I would encourage that you sign up for the DPS alerts or follow
Yes.
us on our various
Yes.
social media, because
Other
we'll advertise it.
Other assist agencies, they may be having one now. And so we market for them as well.
Yeah, so
Park district.
yeah, and so at the vendor fair, which is happening in June this year, there is an action. So I'm just repeating Jackie because I have the microphone. There is a matchmaking aspect of it where you will be able to list, I am capable of subcontracting in these types of areas, and the primes will say, I'm looking for subcontractors in these types of areas, and then we'll try to match you up so that you can meet primes that can potentially give you work, and that lets primes get a better idea of who's out there and actually capable of performing. So we're just gonna go over. We're gonna go over an hour and keep talking. You guys need to leave. don't worry, I won't be offended if anyone needs to take out. Okay. Not a problem. So I'm just going to briefly go over real quick our bid incentives, because these are great opportunities and we want to make sure people are aware of them.
Yeah.
Some of these apply to construction contracts, some of them apply to non-construction, some of them apply to both. We have a bid incentives and programs guide. It's a little outdated. We're going to be issuing a new volume soon, but it's a good resource in the meantime. The veteran-owned business enterprise, small local business joint venture in DBE. That name is a mouthful, but basically what that means is that if you are a veteran-owned business enterprise certified by the City of Chicago, meaning you are 51% owned by veterans, you're a small local business, you can be eligible for this incentive on your own. Or if you are a small local business, you can team up with a veteran-owned business. So it doesn't have to be a local veteran-owned business of any size. So those two different classifications of businesses and business teams can apply for this bid incentive. So this will be an artificial price reduction of your bid if you are eligible based on those criteria. There are certain other aspects that you have to comply with. You have to self-perform or have performed work that are either by the small local business joint venture or the actual DBE as part of it, but good program to keep in mind if you are a veteran-owned firm. Likewise, on the construction area, there are veteran-owned subcontract utilization incentives. So if you are a prime contractor and you know there are veteran-owned firms out there that are certified by the city as VBEs, you can receive a bid incentive for agreeing to utilize that VBE to perform a certain percentage of the work. Similarly, on both construction and non-construction, there is an incentive for committing to utilize businesses that are owned or operated by people with disabilities, either on the prime level or the subcontractor level. Then we also have a city-based manufacturer's incentive. You'll see this a lot in commodities contracts. A city-based business incentive. So this was recently increased to 4%, 6%, or 8% incentive. Those are incredibly large percentages. So if you are eligible, if you are located in the city, excuse me, at least 50% of your workforce is within the city, you're potentially eligible for a very large percentage that can reduce your bid by a fairly significant amount for the purposes of evaluation. For the city-based business, the question was whether it can be a sub. This is a private contractor incentive. There's an apprentice utilization. There's two. You can agree to have apprentices that are ex-offenders, and this isn't just hire any person off the street. We work with the Department of Family and Support Services to screen eligible apprentices for this, as well as there's an incentive for utilizing certain graduates of CPS or City Colleges of, Chicago City Colleges graduates in certain construction programs. There's an incentive for utilizing alternately powered vehicles. Like I mentioned, the Mentor Protege program has an incentive aspect as well as participation credit. I talked about the EEO incentive already. There's a project area subcontractor utilization incentive. So if you are a prime contractor and you agree to commit to having a certain percentage of the work performed by subcontractors that are located in the project area, you are eligible for incentive. It's a great incentive to get prime contractors to not only employ individuals who reside in the project area, which they're required to do, but also use firms that are located in that area. And then finally, there are some instances where the City of Chicago cannot set MBE, WBE goals for various different reasons, whether there's no one certified in that area or there's not enough firms to certify that to allow for competition. In that case, we would have no goals. But we still want prime contractors to use MBE, WBEs anyway if they can. So there's an incentive to utilize MBE, WBEs even if there's no goals. So if there's no goals and you commit to using them, found opportunities anyway, you get an incentive. So I would strongly encourage you to check out our website if you're interested in doing this with the city. All of our rules and regulations are on there. With a searchable directory of MBE, WBEs if you need to find subcontractors. All of our bid incentives are up there. We have all of our awarded contracts are posted on our website. All of our modifications are posted on the website. You can find information about all the payments we've made to our contractors, all the bid tabs for when we've opened bids and the bid tabs that we've when we've tabulated them. Bid opportunities, just a really great resource to find a lot. We're trying to be very transparent and put a lot of information on there so that you can find what you need to do business with us. We have a website listed on the slide. Other ways to find us, we have Facebook, Twitter, All of our workshops are recorded and they're streamed on YouTube. You can find them if you want to go back and rewatch. You know, I am super entertaining, so you might want to listen to me for over an hour again. I think heading over our website. We have a handout that I think you've been given with our workshop schedule, so you can see the rest of our workshops. It's also on our website if you're interested. So, thank you for attending. I know we went over. I'm happy to stay and answer questions if you have any. I also can give you my card, so you can email or call if you have questions as well. So, thank you. Jackie, I'm just going to turn this